Tonight on The Henry Rollins Show, the man behind the instant film classics Traffic in Syriana, writer-director Stephen Gaghan is here to discuss the very timely release of Syriana on DVD. And the powerful and prolific Ani DeFranco is here with us to perform an outspoken song off her new album, Reprieve. This is an important show, folks, so don't move. Well, I guess we found a cure for AIDS. We're now past the 25-year mark of HIV and AIDS, so I guess it's in the rear view, back there with the Berlin Wall and prosperity. I don't hear about the threat of AIDS anymore, so I guess thousands of people's lives aren't being ravaged by HIV. That's fantastic! Oh, wait a minute. Almost 3 million people have died of AIDS in 2005, says the avert.org site, and the UNAIDS.org site says an estimated 38.6 million people are living with HIV. It is true that the global target expenditure was achieved at over $8 billion in 2005, but treatment and spread reduction rates were not achieved. People living with HIV and the spread of the AIDS virus is most prevalent in Africa, studies say, and that's at least part of the problem. There's other problems, of course, like here in America, we have a lot of things to worry about as it is, and somehow the threat of HIV and AIDS is still only a gay and intravenous drug user problem. So, for the good and normal people of America, it's business as usual. Here's another problem. The most at-risk demographic is the most rapidly rising HIV statistic, and that would be young people. With a president who wholeheartedly endorses abstinence-only sex ed in classrooms and the radical Christian right doing everything they can to keep the ignorance level high and the access to information on contraception and prevention of sexually transmitted diseases away from those who need it most, thousands of young people are on a collision course with HIV and AIDS. With a lack of awareness, the threat of HIV and AIDS could be more powerful than ever. After 25 years of clear evidence of how awful contracting HIV is, what could possibly be the excuse not to tell every young person what the deal is? We need more informative education and awareness than ever, not fear tactics, politicization, and activist Christian agendas which prove over and over again to be unsustainable, unrealistic, and hate to tell you, you radical Christians and Bush supporters, ineffective. And sooner than later, you may find yourselves viewed as much of a threat to young people as HIV itself. Joining me now is writer and director Stephen Gaghan, whose films Traffic in Syriana have shed much-needed light on the worlds of drug trafficking and the oil industry. Syriana was recently released on DVD, and Stephen is hard at work on his next project, Blink. But he was kind enough to take a break and join us today. Stephen, it's a pleasure to meet you, man.
Hey, nice to meet you, too.
Thanks for showing up. So,
no worries.
How have you been?
I'm in that writing phase, so it's a big struggle. You know, I have a lot of balls up in the air trying to turn Blink into a movie, but it's I'm doing well.
Cool.
Gonna surf later. Looking forward to it.
Oh, nice. Well, we're gonna definitely get to Blink because I want to know all about that. But first, I want to talk about Syriana. Do you think that with recent events, that the film is possibly more relevant now than when it hit the theaters months ago?
You know, that's an interesting question. The original ending of Syriana was George Bush going into Congress, and I was going to use actual footage from the Iraq War declaration, and he's going to declare war on Iran. So, in other words, the end of the movie would be the actual president of the United States declaring war on Iran.
Right.
Okay, in 2003, this goes up the flagpole, you know, at the studio and with the producers, and everyone's like, you're insane. We're getting along great with Iran. There's not going to be any war in Iran. What are you talking about? Meanwhile, you know, my number one, you know, cohort and source for most of the stuff is the ex-Iraq bureau chief, you know, Bob Baer. So all his pals are like Iran hands, and they're all these guys who've spent 25 years. And so what's coming down to me is like, doesn't matter what's going on now. They have a nuclear program. The minute they start looking like they're going to test a bomb, gloves are off, and we're in a new day. They all said to me from the first moment of research on Syriana, Iraq is a sideshow. So in 2003, I was trying to fight for this ending, and it was incredibly hard. So anyway, do I think it's relevant? I mean, absolutely, in terms of what's going on with Iranian policy, that Iran is coming back to the center of sort of our Middle Eastern policy, and it got ejected for a little while. But then, and on the other side, it's just gas prices. You fill up your car and it's $75, and I think that, this is definitely, as gas goes to $4, $5, $6 a gallon, which is inevitable, the politics and the policies that underlie Syriana, have to become more relevant. I mean, just have to. They hit your pocketbook, so you go, wait, what was that crazy movie about, It was Fat Clooney. I don't know, he was like angry about something.
Yeah. It seems to me that our thing with Iran is because the Unocal pipeline didn't work, and we need their northeastern border with Turkmenistan. That's key, the Caspian gas and oil reserve.
Yeah, it's funny. I spent a lot of years, obviously, researching this and reading about it and talking to people, oilmen and European, secretive money guys, and people that do seem to have their hands on levers that I didn't know existed. And you can analyze really you can analyze geopolitics from a financial perspective. And then there's this kind of flip side that says, well, you don't really believe it's just about oil, do you, Steve? That's so naive. It's not about that. It's about the fundamentalists driving policy and thinking there's going to be last days on the shores of Jerusalem. Or it's really about a re-election strategy that, no president in a time of war has ever been unseated, so you have to have a war, And so, anyway, there's the money side, and then there's kind of like this amorphous, it's all these other things, and you go, all right, we put these incredible sanctions into place against Iraq. Iraq has all this energy in the Western Desert. No one knows what's out there exactly. It hasn't really been surveyed properly, but there are rumors of Saudi-size pools of energy underneath the ground. Well, during our embargo phase, where no American companies are allowed to trade with Iraq, what's happening? What's happening in Iraq? I can tell you what's happening. The French are trading with Iraq. The Russians are trading with Iraq. The Japanese and Chinese are trading with Iraq. And so America has now got last seat at the table. There's not even crumbs left for us. So in a post-embargo world, post-92, we don't get any of that energy unless what? Unless you reset the table.
Yeah.
And if you reset the table, then all those agreements and alliances are thrown out. And now it's open, and obviously, our Halliburton-run government will have first dibs going in. Now, I'm massively conflicted by this because I'm also a huge beneficiary of the standard of living in the United States. I know what it means to be able to get in my fucking 66 GTO and go cruising around with the top down on the LA freeways. So it's not easy to point fingers. It's complicated. But I'll tell you, the minute I threw out all those tortured arguments for the Iraq War and suddenly said, well, what if we're just resetting the table for energy?
Yeah, follow the money.
You just go, suddenly, like, you're not confused anymore. You go, oh.
I wish they'd just been following the money.
If they'd just been honest, I swear to you, if the President of the United States went to the country and said, listen, here's what happened, and we need this oil. We need it. Look, you're driving an SUV. You think you need it? You need it. I think America would have gone, all right, I buy that, It's in our national interest. But there's just all this tortured, hidden, sneaky bullshit covering it up that drives you crazy.
As a citizen, not a filmmaker, what did you learn from Syriana?
That's an awesome question, because it was really just one jaw drop. I mean, the research phase, where I got to travel in Europe with this CIA officer, ex-CIA officer, but 23 years as a CIA officer, and I started to network through his Rolodex, essentially. And you meet these kind of, global oil and arms guys, and very early on, I kept hearing this quote, and it was so amazing. They said, the oil business and the arms business are the same business. It's the same business. Get it through your head, Steve. It's the same business. And I'm like, huh? What? They go, no, the dollar figures on arms deals are too big. Governments don't write checks. You want to sell like $14 billion worth of, fighter jets to some country. You don't go, well, here's a check for $14 billion, thank you, and deposit it, at the Citibank. It's like what happens actually is oil's traveling on a bunch of tankers headed some way under a Liberian flag. That oil's owned by X company. Suddenly it's under, it's under one government flag in a partnership with 3 people. Suddenly the flag changes, the ship changes direction, and the payment for these jets comes in energy, energy and arms, the bullet and the oil are the same thing. And I was just like, and these are the guys, you know, that have their own 767s, you know, have the $100 million estate overlooking Geneva, and you tend to take them seriously.
Yeah. I think it's important that people know how deeply you go into research mode to get your films together. So can you talk about your research trip into Beirut for Syriana?
It's really a funny, you know, yeah, it is a good story. It's a weird story. Being by yourself, landing in the Middle East at the airport, at the Beirut airport, in a post 9/11 world, when there's just nobody around that looks like you. And you feel automatically like this kind of exposed American fear. It was spooky. But my cell phone rang, answers, and it's a guy. And he's a acquaintance of an acquaintance of Bob Baer, who's our, as you know, our ex-Iraq bureau chief, but also the man who wrote, you know, See No Evil, which See No Evil is about, is infiltrating, a lot of it's about infiltrating Hezbollah in Beirut in the 80s. So here's a guy whose book is the #1 bestseller in Beirut at this moment, for, you know, talking about how he infiltrated Hezbollah. And his friend's friend is calling me up, and it's just this voice. I've never met him. The voice goes, I have something very special you can do, but I can't tell you what it is, and you have to do it right now. I'm standing in line, like waiting to get my passport stamped in Beirut. I'm like, what? Now? Yes, right now. And you can't tell me what it is? No, but my driver will be out front and take you. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, really, you'll be glad you did this. Oh my God. So I go out and I get in the back of the car with this guy who doesn't speak any English, and I don't speak any Arabic. And we're driving down the highway from the airport. Suddenly, boom, car just turns off, and we're through this narrow road, and I know exactly enough to know about Beirut. I know enough to know that I'm in the southern suburbs. I'm in like the place that's the Hezbollah stronghold. And I'm down these little narrow streets. They get narrower and narrower, and I'm clueless. Turn. I start looking, and there's guys with guns. There's guys with guns stuck in their waistband. There's guys up on roofs with rifles. Anyway, this gate drops across the road. Like, it's a public road, and there's a gate operated by private people. You're just not used to seeing this. It's like not like guys in uniforms. It's like guys in like t-shirts with guns stuck in their waistband who've just decided to close off the road, like as a hobby. They took me out of the car. They took my backpack, my pins, everything out of my pockets. They took my belt. They took my shoes. And then they took me around the gate and put me in this other car, and then they blindfolded me like a little. And I just, you know, it happened really fast.
Did you think I'm going to get executed?
I thought, you know, it's weird. Like, two things were going on simultaneously. One, the way they were dealing with me did not feel like a kidnapping. Like, it felt like this is done a lot. This is the standard security. I mean, it felt more official, even though it didn't look official.
Right.
Like, it wasn't, they weren't manhandling me and screaming at me. They were being polite, but then, so that's on one hand. And then on the other hand, you've been in Beirut for 15 minutes, and you have a hood over your head, and you're back of some fucking car, and you're riding through these streets, and I'm just sitting there going, you're the dumbest person ever. You're incompetent. I mean, your connection is Bob Baer, a guy who infiltrated Hezbollah. I mean, all these people want to do. I met all these Syrians and guys in the Syrian intelligence, and they're like, Baer cannot go to Beirut. Baer cannot go to Beirut. It's too dangerous. Everyone's read that book. They all want to know who did he flip in the 80s? And these are guys with long memories. They want to know who Baer flipped. Who was the CIA working through? And I'm like, and who are you? You're the guy that's been in the newspaper who's adapting his book, you know? It's just, it's stupid. Anyway, there are guys standing around like you're waiting to meet like your local alderman in some neighborhood. You know, it's like in a civic, people look like farmers waiting to ask favors of the Godfather. And I'm just waiting. And eventually, a door opens and a shadow passes, and this guy door opens, and they bring me in. And Saeed Fadlalah's there with some of the political people from, he's the spiritual leader of Hezbollah, and some of the political people are there. And it's very austere and very quiet. Everybody has a gun. They put me in a high-back chair next to him. He doesn't speak English, I don't speak Arabic. And we just sit there. And it's really strange. And then finally the door opens, and in comes the friend of the friend, who speaks great English and perfect Arabic. And he says, I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm so sorry I'm late. This is Saeed Fadlallah. This is a great honor. Ask him anything you like. And my response is, I'm just like, I can't think of a thing. I mean, I had no idea what was going on. With context, it wasn't a kidnapping. I mean, it didn't feel like a kidnapping, really. And with context, you would understand that.
Yeah.
But you're just like, what am I doing here? I have a child.
Man, my jaw's on the ground. This stuff is amazing.
It's just like, and I think I say to like people that, filmmakers, like people, particularly aspiring writers, I talk to a lot, and I'm always mentoring people through these different programs, and I'm always saying, it's just, the best stuff is out there, You don't have to be, Mankiewicz or, one of these guys, I don't have that level of skill. It's just, there's so much great stuff out in the world. If you just leave LA, leave the country, go out in the world and just listen. There's just, the great stuff will be handed to you.
Yeah. Let's talk about Blink. It's going to be a DiCaprio film. This is probably going to be a mainstream for you.
God, I hope so. I want to throw a slow, fast, fat pitch right over the center of the plate. I think, with Blink, what got me excited about it, I mean, really, is something, again, it's quite esoteric in a weird way, and it's that Malcolm Gladwell has a voice that's wonderful. He had a thesis about thin slicing, the first impression, what happens, what do you see when you first, your quote, intuition tells you something about a person, or, is someone telling you the truth or not? And that's this Blink moment, what he called the first 2 seconds. And he makes a long case from a lot of different directions, for sort of how that happens and why it matters. And I'm really drawn to that thesis. Like, I like that thesis a lot. And there's one little section of the book that I think was a place to look to develop a dynamic. And so basically Malcolm and I and Leo created some original characters that aren't in the book. And he's playing someone who doesn't exist in the book. It's all sort of made up. And it sort of loosely starts with one little section and then just goes off on this kind of crazy thing. So I think that if you had to work all of the material in Blink into a movie, you would, well, I thought about that, and I rapidly went insane. Right. It's not possible, so.
How long has this been on the board?
I've been working on it pretty nonstop for about 6 months, and so I'm in that suffering phase. Right. I'm in the self-pity, the navel-gazing self-pity phase of work.
Well, thanks for being here. And
it's nice to meet you.
And thank you for making these films that really matter. And I can't wait for the next one, because I'm a fan of yours, definitely a fan of Leo's. And thanks for being on the show.
It's really great to meet you. It's likewise. I'm sure you hear it all the time. But
oh, thank you, man. Thank you very much. Coming up later in the show, an exclusive musical performance from Ani DeFranco. But first, a letter to Arnold Schwarzenegger. Dear Governor Schwarzenegger, I'm often asked what it's like to have you as the governor of the state in which I reside. They ask how embarrassing is it to hear you fold in titles of your shitty movies and phrases associated with you into your speeches. They always go into bad imitations of you and say stuff like, I will be a Terminator on taxes and a kindergarten cop on crime. It's lame to know that our governor spent the prime of his life shooting steroids, lifting weights, lying in tanning beds, shaving his nuts, and wearing bikini briefs to pose out with other drug addicts in the pseudo-sport of bodybuilding. You call Democrats losers. So what happened to your propositions that would make it easier to fire school teachers, limit unions from contributing to political causes, and give you unilateral power to cut school funding? I'll remind you. After spending $50 million in state money for your special election to pass these propositions, every single one of them were defeated. You fucking loser. You do have some fans, though. Orrin Hatch wants to butcher the Constitution so you can run for president. Can you imagine how hard and decisively you would get your ass handed to you in Washington, D.C.? What would you be out there where no one is impressed with corny actors? Conan the Barbarian of the Beltway? Can you see yourself in a real debate on national issues, trying to smile through your fake tan as you dispatch one of your god-awful one-liners from one of your moronic movies? Michael Moore could kick your ass. I wish you could run for president. I'll need another Republican conservative douchebag to pummel after Bush shuffles off. I know from all the women who said you groped them that you're not gay. And that's a relief. Sexual harassment is nowhere near as bad as being weak on the defense of marriage, which, as you know, is under attack in America. I think the best thing for you to do, Governor Assengrabber, is go to Hollywood and get back to work making more films just like Commando, True Lies, Red Heat, The Last Action Hero, Collateral Damage, Junior, and T3. You know, shitty movies. You're so good at it. And I can't resist. Hasta la vista, baby Arnold. Henry. And now, here's Heidi May with this week's musical performance from Ani DeFranco.
Thanks, Henry. Since 1990, singer-songwriter Ani DeFranco has released almost 20 albums on her own label, aptly named Righteous Babe Records. Her outspoken, socially relevant lyrics, combined with relentless touring, has solidified her as one of the most prolific artists of our time. Here to perform Millennium Theater from her new album, Reprieve, this is the amazing Ani DeFranco, Uncut.
Just one clarification before we begin. I could have written the first verse better so it was understandable, but hence the clarification. The word impeachment appears in this verse, which when we play it live makes everybody lose their shit, because that's a very coveted word these days. But the song, unfortunately, is set at the turn of the century, and the impeachment I'm talking about is that circus surrounding Bill Clinton and his famous blowjob. It strikes me as kind of funny that stealing elections, rigging elections, lying to the American public, violating international treaties and making wars for profit, and it's not grounds for impeachment, as we come to learn. It's only blowjobs. Millennium Theater. Get out there and buy that water and gas. Ramadan, orange alert. Everybody put on your gas mask. First leak it out about the president. Then stand up and shout impeachment. Pull them coattails out from under that little VP before he has a chance to get in the driver's seat. Millennium spectacle. Everybody put on a show. Slip the little prince in the back door. 21st century, here we go. Digital whiplash. So many formats, so little time. While out in TV Nation, under darkening skies, the resistance is just waiting to be organized. Halliburton and Run. Chief Justices for sale. Yucca Mountain goddesses. Their tears, they form a trail. Trickle down pollution. Patriarchies realign. While the ice caps melting, New Orleans bides her time. New Orleans bides her time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's show, the Millennium Theater. Ask that you not smoke. Please turn off your cell phones and forget what you think you know.
Thank you again to our guests, Ani DeFranco and Stephen Gaghan. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.